Chair, the meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee is now live. The following members are present for this meeting. Chair, Councillor Steve Bridger. Vice Chair, Councillor Robert Leach. Councillor Chris Ames. Councillor Rachel King. Councillor James Lawrence. Councillor Phil Neal. Councillor Chris Watson. Apologies have been received from Councillor Jan Mason. Also in attendance at this meeting are Councillor Alex Coley and Councillor Kate Chin. The officers in attendance at this meeting are Head of Legal and Monitoring Officer Piero Ionta, Interim Director of Corporate Services Andy Bircher, Head of Finance Brendan Bradley, Business Assurance Manager Will Mace, and Democratic Services Officer Phoebe Batchelor. A representative of the Council's External Auditor Raymond Dagano from Grant Thornton is in attendance for items 1 to 4. A representative of the Council's Internal Auditor Natalie Jerams from the Southern Internal Audit Partnership will be in attendance remotely for item 10. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome to the meeting. I'll just ask my Vice Chair to read out the fire alarm.
No emergency drill is planned to take place during this meeting. If the fire alarm sounds continuously, or if you are instructed to do so, you must leave the building by the nearest available exit. You will be directed to the nearest exit by council staff. It is vital that you follow their instructions. You should proceed calmly, do not run, and do not use the lifts. Do not stop to collect personal belongings. Once you are outside, please do not wait immediately next to the building, but move to the assembly point at Dulshot Green and await further instructions, and do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so.
Thank you. Part 1 of the agenda is questions and statements from the public. We've got a question from a member of the public.
If you'd like to come forward, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask your question.
Would you like me to read the original question and answer?
If you just read the question.
Well, the factual background to the question is, on the 27th of April, council officers met with the LGO and committed to reflect on its practices and take necessary steps to improve its liaison with my office. And that arises from a Freedom of Information request 207.23. And that's a quote directed towards the previous chief executive. Chairman Bridger received the LGO annual review letter on the 20th of July, FOI 376.23, where it was stated by the LGO, I have sought to share this letter with the leader of your council and chair of the appropriate scrutiny committee to encourage effective ownership and oversight of complaint outcomes which offer such valuable opportunities to learn and improve. The work plan for the 17th of November 22 Audit and Scrutiny Committee meeting states at paragraph 4.1, when the council receives its annual letter from the local government and social care ombudsman, we will note here whether any recommendations have been put to the council by the ombudsman. After providing answers in FOI 207.23 and FOI 376.23, the council confirmed that, quote, a review of the service was carried out resulting in changes and improvements on procedure and LGO communication, and that commenced on the 1st of February 2023. The work plan for the 2nd of February Audit and Scrutiny Committee meeting again stated at the same paragraph 4.1, when the council receives its annual letters from the local government and social care ombudsman, we will note here whether any recommendations have been put to the council by the ombudsman. The minutes for the 2nd of February Audit and Scrutiny Committee states at page 17, paragraph 31A, quote, Ombudsman complaints and data protection breaches. A member of the committee expressed concern that information regarding Ombudsman complaints and data protection breaches had not been presented to the committee. The Interim Director of Corporate Services informed the committee that a response regarding these matters would be provided to committee members following the meeting. The LGO annual review was finally presented to the audit scrutiny on the 6th of April 2023, as confirmed on the 6th of September by the Council, 6th of September this year by the Council, in answer to question 3 of FOI 376.23, where it says, quote, information not held on whether Councillor Bridger first shared the 2022 annual review letter with members of the Audit Committee. However, the 2022 annual review letter was taken to Audit and Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of April 2023. Question. Please explain why the Chair did not present the July 22 LGO annual review to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee at the November 22 and the February 23 meetings as the work plan required.
Thank you. We have sent a written reply to you, and the reply is prior to 2023, the committee work plan in place required the LGO annual letter to be brought to the April meeting each year. The work plan has since been adjusted to include the annual LGO letter in the September meeting and to feature the letter as a standalone report rather than being included within the work programme report. Please note that the annual letters and the other LGO statistics are freely available to the public. A link to the Council's performance data page of the LGO website was included in the work plan reports running from April 2022 to February 2023. Have you any supplementary questions?
Yes, I do. Just prior to asking my supplementary question, can I ask for clarity? Because the answer that you've just given refers back to work plans. It says prior to 2023, the committee work plan is in place, required the LGO annual letter to be brought to the April meeting each year. Now I've got all of the work plans here, and I can't see any reference to that for any of the work plans prior to 2023. So can you direct me to where that is stated?
The answer to that has been given, and the officers will look into it for you. We'll come back with a written reply.
But this is incorrect. It's factually incorrect. I've got them all here. It's just not what it says.
So we've given the answer, you've asked the question, and we will come back to you.
Are you accepting that the answer is factually incorrect?
Not accepting anything. Until it's been looked into, then
I submitted this question in advance of this meeting, and
this isn't a debate. That is how it stands.
Okay, so we'll go on the factually incorrect answer that you've given. Why should residents of Epsom and Ewell have confidence in the transparency and effectiveness of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee when pivotal information such as the 2022 LGO annual review, and perhaps other information over the last 4 years, is not being shared in a timely manner with committee members?
Thank you. Well, I'll refer to the written response which has been sent to you. The committee has adjusted its work plan to ensure that the annual LGO letters are brought to the committee at the next available meeting after its receipt, thus addressing timeliness issues. Transparency has been further reinforced by bringing the LGO annual letter as a standalone committee report. Further, in the July 2023 LGO annual letter, the interim Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman states, in reference to difficulties last year, that he is pleased to report our experience with Epsom and Ewell Borough Council has improved this year, and I hope this good relationship continues into the future. I hope this reassures residents that the committee takes transparency and continuous improvement seriously. So would you like to make a statement at all?
Yes, I would like to make a statement. I was refused the opportunity to ask a question at the 2nd of February Audit and Scrutiny meeting. I believe in breach of my constitutional rights. Today I have again had a second question refused. Two issues arise out of that. Firstly, my second question referred to a meeting the previous chief exec had with the Ombudsman on the 27th of April last year, where she, quote, committed to reflect on council practices and take necessary steps to improve its liaison with the LGO. Full details of that can be seen in my FOI 207.23. This meeting predated the July 2022 annual review and hence cannot be on the same topic. Epsom Council's response to a further FOI 376.23 indicated that the review commenced on the 1st of February. My question was, why the 10-month delay? A delay in implementing a review is different to the issue of the LGO annual review. The principle of public questions is to promote scrutiny and accountability and should not be refused on frivolous grounds. Secondly, even if they were on the same topic, so what? What are you afraid of? Why don't you want people to ask questions? There's 30 minutes set aside at the start of the meeting to answer questions, so why not answer them? Failing to provide the committee with the LGO annual review is just one example of this committee not being transparent. But why? What was the reason the chief exec had to meet? Was the reason the chief exec had to meet the LGO in April 22 due to maladministration in part of the council in liaising with an LGO inquiry? I've made a further FOI 461.23, which is due to be returned on the 6th of October, which might shed light on this. A formal call to action was made in October 22 to this committee to look at why there were issues liaising with the LGO. It was summarily refused by officers and the chair, not making its way to the committee in breach of the committee's responsibilities. Following my FOI 193.23, asking for a reason, none was provided. I referred this failure to the monitoring officer on the 21st of July this year by way of formal complaint. It was totally ignored. I've not received any reply. So the Audit and Scrutiny Committee appeared to me to be unwilling to scrutinise, and the Council Monitoring Officer appears to be unwilling to monitor. Where else do residents go? Officers and/or RA members shield significant issues from this committee, then try to patch things up behind the scenes in an attempt to present it in a positive picture. It is much less an Audit and Scrutiny Committee, but rather a Budget and Secrecy Committee. What else may be occurring behind the scenes? At the last full council meeting in July, members agreed on increasing delegated powers of officers. From the minutes, it is recorded that this was because of some operational issues concerning council's scheme of delegation. This resulted in the widening of delegated powers to the chief exec and officers. But what were these operational issues? Why are they not on today's agenda? Members approved a £15,000 budget for a barrister to fix these operational issues. Shouldn't this committee be considering why those had issues in the first place? In my view, this committee is not performing a genuine scrutiny function. The question is, for how long has this been the case? What other instances of possible maladministration have been kept from these members? What else has been going on in this Budget and Secrecy Committee?
Thank you. Now we're moving on to item 2. Sorry? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, if I might raise this point of order, I'm actually with Mr. Jagutpal in doubting whether this rule that there is a second question is not allowed to be related to the first question actually exists. It looks as if it's another something that the officers have inferred from something in the operating framework that doesn't actually say that. It's kind of a bit like evolving a rule that I might keep a dog into one that I may not keep a cat. It's just an inference that's being drawn that doesn't exist. I'd like an explanation for that. I'd like an explanation for where in the rules it says this, because Mr. Jagutpal is clearly unhappy that he's been again denied the right to ask a second question. And I just do not believe that that rule exists. However, more to the point, I've noticed that every time Mr. Jagutpal tries to ask a question that risks embarrassment for officers or for yourself, Chair, some arcane rule is plucked out of the air to shut him down. It absolutely reeks of cover-up and pettiness. What must residents think of a residents' association council using every trick in the book to keep residents in their place?
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, in relation to the issue about a second question, decisions were taken in accordance with the Constitution, advice was given to the member of the public, and an explanation provided. In relation to whether or not more than a second question can be asked, I've previously advised this committee, as to my interpretation as monitoring officer, that the current Constitution and the relevant annex is to be read that way. So my advice has been quite clear. That's how we're operating, and hopefully that addresses that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to part 2, which is declarations of interest. Have we any declarations of interest for the meeting, please? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to the part 3, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Could I confirm that the minutes are correct from the last meeting, please? All those in agreement? Yes, thank you. Agreed. We'll move on to the part 4, which is the external audit update, which is introduced by Brendan, Head of Finance, and the committee is asked to receive the indicative external report plan, audit plan for 22-23.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the external audit plan is provided by Grant Thornton, who are due to start our audit on the 22-23 statement of accounts next month. I think I'll hand over to Mr. Doganio from Grant Thornton. Would you like to introduce the audit plan?
Thank you, Brendan. Yeah, as Brendan mentioned, the intention is to start the audit from next month, that's October. And just to give you, I'll take the report as read, the indicative audit plan, and we'll just highlight some of the key elements of our report. So in terms of the materiality, it's all the same. We're using still the same benchmark, and significant risks is also the same. It's more like a recurring risk for this audit. Nothing new we identified based on our indicative audit plan. And again, we will revisit this as we complete with our audit planning in October. And in terms of the timing of the audit, yeah, we will do the audit in October for planning. And I think if there is a massive change on our indicative audit plan, we will communicate that to the members of the committee. But although we're not expecting really much to change at this stage. We intend to complete the audit by January. So that by January 2024, the audit findings report, including the draft audit plan, our audit report should also be available from January, unless there's an event that would prevent us from doing so. And I'll pause there to take any questions from the members of the committee.
Any questions at all on the report, please? Councillor Lawrence.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the significant risks identified parts. Does that mean there's just going to be like specific focus put into these, like an extended part of the report, or is it just something that you're just noting this is on my mind when doing the audit? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. What we're doing for the audit, we do our audit plan. So we identify what we're going to do for the whole audit. And then we also identify some of our focus. So there would be increased audit procedures on those areas that we noted on our audit plan. So audit planning wise, it's still the same. There's no any concentration on those significant risks that we mentioned. So we'll just pick them up as part of the more focus areas on our work.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? Councillor King.
On page 29, it talks about performance materiality, and it mentions that there's a reduction from the prior year due to issues identified with the accounts. I just wanted to understand a bit more about what that might relate to.
Thanks for the question. The way we do the materiality, we have this methodology to think about the result of the work that we've done in the past. So if we've identified some of the cumulative impact of the corrected and uncorrected misstatements, if it's exceeded a certain threshold on our side, we will reduce that slightly. So last year, I think it was 75%, but due to the outcome of the audit, I mean, there's no massive concern on last year's audit, but it's more to do with the impact of the cumulative effect of the misstatements we noted last year. Yeah, but I don't expect, I mean, based on my assessment, I don't expect much to change in terms of our work. Like some of these significant accounts, as we call them, it would be the same for this year's audit.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, my question is regarding the risk and the risk identification. In light of the Woking debacle of the land valuation and valuation of their commercial investments, are we satisfied? First of all, I noticed that we have valuations on a rolling 5-year basis. Where are we in that 5-year? When was the last time our property was valued? Could I ask that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. So what the valuation rolling 5-year period means is we wouldn't revalue any asset any less frequently than 5 years. So every asset is valued at least once every 5 years. In practice, we do get them valued much more frequently because we have a responsibility in the accounts to report valuations that are true and fair. So especially in an economic environment that's quite volatile, and valuations are moving around more than they have done in the previous economic cycle, we get the properties revalued more regularly than every 5 years. So every property has been valued at least once in the last 5 years, and the majority much more frequently. And if the auditor thinks a property hasn't been valued recently enough, they will raise that in their findings.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? I'll move on to the recommendations. That the committee is asked to receive the indicative external audit plan for 22-23. Are all those in favour, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. We'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the revenue budget monitoring quarter 1. Over to Brendan. Thanks very much, Rowan.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you say, the report sets out the forecast for the remainder of this year, 23-24, as at quarter 1, which is the end of June. I think overall the councils we're forecasting to come in quite close to budget, just 98,000 over, which is around 1% of the budget. The main reasons for that are set out in the report. Principally, we're expecting a shortfall on planning income and increased expenditure on homelessness services, and those extra pressures are partially offset by increased licensing income and increased treasury management income. We keep monitoring the variances and will, wherever possible, we take mitigating action. I think for the 2 key adverse variances, we've recommended that reports go to the specific committee, and we'll report back again to you in November with an update at quarter 2. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions at all, please? Councillor Leach.
It's not so much a question, it's an observation. I'm an accountant myself, and although it's a long time since I've done accounts, I wish they all came out within 1% of budget. So I would just like to say that I think you're doing a very good job.
Thank you, Chair, and Vice Chair. And just to caveat that, if I won't take any credit, 'cause if things could change before the end of the year significantly. At this stage, Q1, we tend to expect that officers, if they have got an adverse variance, will take mitigating action to rectify that by the end of the year. But where we think it's so significant that that's not likely to be possible in full, that's where we tend to recommend further action at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
So I'm not an accountant and numbers aren't my favourite thing, but can I just clarify, because on page 41, I make it 99,000 rather than 98,000, and 98,000 is referenced in lots of places, but I make the difference between 8289 and 8388, 99, not 98. Not trying to be difficult, just.
I think it's a presentation issue because the numbers are rounded to the nearest thousand. It is summed in Excel, so some of them are rounded down and some up, but I'll look to correct that presentation in future. Thank you.
Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the trying to reduce the costs that we incur with the homelessness and hotel costs, etc., which is horrendous. I know that we've got an initiative to provide 3 modular buildings or modular houses to try and reduce this, but it does seem to me a very lack of speed, if you like, about this, and I think that I'd like to have seen a lot more progress in accelerating that program of modular housing as a to signal that we care about the homeless, but also B, to reduce this massive cost that's going into hotels rather than into the community of Epsom and Ewell. I'm not sure whether this is the right committee to voice that, but if you're talking about the deficit or the cost of the homelessness hotel bill, I thought I would raise it at this point.
It's actually more to do with community and wellbeing committee.
Well, it's a question really of trying to reduce that deficit or looking forward to reduce it, and why aren't we doing more to do it? But
would you like an action point to go back to get to the community and wellbeing? Okay, we'll do that. We'll come back. Thank you. Any further questions at all, please? We'll move on to the recommendations. There are 4 parts to this. Part 1, receive the revenue budget monitoring report, which sets out projected deficit of 98 or 99,000, 23-24. Part 2, to agree that the report should be prepared for Community and Wellbeing Committee to consider long-term mitigation options for the increased costs of nightly paid accommodation within the homelessness service. Part 3 is to agree that a report should be prepared for Licensing and Planning Policy Committee to consider long-term mitigation options for the projected shortfall on planning income and the impact of the government's review of planning fees. And Part 4, to agree that the updated Q2 position will be reported back to the Audit and Scrutiny Committee in November. Have all those in favour, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. We'll move on to Part 6, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Q1, and we have Councillor Coley. You have a statement to make.
Thank you, Chair. I commend the many excellent projects in the Capital Budget Monitoring Report, but I ask members to consider the items on the Capital Project Progress Table, which could have been considered as planned maintenance, and therefore funded by revenue expenditure as part of the planned maintenance programme. In particular, those items which have required significant additional funds less than a year after the original decision was made to commit funds. We have an extensive 10-year strategic asset management programme, which lists all expected works on our estates and property. Will members please consider the long lead times and the impact of rampant inflation on additional costs, which could be avoided by managing items on the 10-year strategic asset management plan as part of the planned maintenance programme. Planned maintenance should be for repair and replacement, not capital investment. And I think that our capital programme would also come in within 1% accuracy if we were managing it as capital investment rather than shifting revenue items across into these long lead times that are impacted by inflation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 6, which is, as I say, the capital budget monitoring Q1, and the committee is asked to receive the capital monitoring position of Q1 as set out in the report. It's over to Brendan.
Thank you, Chair. So the report sets out our expected capital reserves, and it gives a brief summary of progress against each capital scheme. I think the report did ask if there were detailed questions on individual schemes, whether those could be submitted in advance, so I could go back to the scheme manager and get more information from them. But I'm happy to try and take any questions on the capital schemes.
Thank you. Any questions at all, please? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking about something on page 55. So I was looking at the affordable housing breakdown of unallocated S106 balances, and we haven't used any of it. I was having just a little look into what that fund is, and to my understanding is it something that you use when you have an affordable housing percentage or allocation on new developments and it's unfundable for the developer, we can allocate from that fund. So from my understanding of this is telling me that none of the developers had an affordable housing target that they couldn't meet, and so we didn't use anything from that fund. And I just want to check, is there an advantage in stacking up this fund, or should we instead be looking at having more ambitious affordable housing and then using that fund? i.e., is this a use it or lose it, or is it something you can accumulate? Thank you.
So you're right, where a developer can't meet its affordable housing obligations on a particular development, they can be required to make a Section 106 contribution in lieu of that the council can then use to try and provide alternative affordable housing separately, and that can take many forms, including providing additional temporary accommodation, for example, to help out our homelessness situation. I think we can accumulate funds. Some of the agreements with developers do stipulate that those funds need to be required to be used within a certain time frame. I think what's most important is that when those funds are deployed, they're targeted at the most effective schemes that deliver the greatest benefit that they can leverage in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask one question. I'm sorry I didn't submit this before, but just about the York Courthouse tea rooms, which my constituents are all looking forward to seeing it being restored. There may not be the information available at the moment to answer my question, but I noticed that it was on page 61. There is a statement about the anticipated completion by the end of the calendar year, but apparently there are various project dependencies that could cause delay. So I'm just curious about what they may be. If the answer isn't available now, I'm quite happy to take it in writing later.
I'd rather not speculate, so could I provide that in writing later? Thank you.
Thank you. We get that back to you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's on that Section 106 balances. You've got at the bottom item there, funds held for Horton. The Horton was the chapel. Could you please explain what it's being held for?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, those funds are held to pass over to the Heritage and Arts, what is it, Horton Chapel Heritage Arts Association. I think we awarded them a grant of around £1.45 million several years ago to convert Horton Chapel, and we've passed the vast majority of those funds over to them, and this is the remaining balance. I believe we're about to pass that final tranche over to them. So they incur the expenditure, and we reimburse them after the event when they claim for it, and we're about to make that final payment over to them.
Okay, that's why I really wanted to ask. I have been involved. I shouldn't have. It's not as a pecuniary involvement, but we did help to help when the main contractor went into liquidation or administration. But I know that they have been struggling to. Sorry, can I just ask that? So that 187 is really a retention that's been held. Is this going to go into finalising the final account for the main building, or is this for, because I know they've got some severe drainage problems, is this money going to go there, or is this already allocated for the main construction?
I believe it's already allocated, so it's part of their £1.45 million grant award. It's not additional funds over and above that, and they have claimed this final tranche. We're just awaiting sign off of the invoices to pay it over to them, but it's not additional funds over and above the the original grant award.
So it's most probably going to go to the receiver of the original contract rather than for any extra works that was outstanding.
So we don't pay the contractors directly. We do pay the funds to the trust.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. This question's about the ICT programme of works, page 59. So I was just having a little look through that.
Sorry,
and page 59. So I was just having a little look at that funding, and I know that that was approved in a strategy and resource committee, I think, this March. So this is a bit specific, so I don't mind if the reply's in writing at some point. But I was having a little look through at the IT strategy, and it had at some point something like 25k grand for SharePoint, and that was approved the March previously in 22. And it said that, quote, the head of IT is reviewing the scope and deliverables of this project. Until complete, it is not possible to be clear on the funding required. But that had been approved already in March 29th of March 2022. So my question more just is, if that cost is variable and it changes a lot, does that have to be reapproved by SNR? Do we see it? Is there like a tolerance that's, I assume, allowed before, if it goes over that, then it has to be reapproved? Just a little bit of clarity on that, because I'm not quite sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So yeah, there is a threshold that officers can approve within the capital programme without having to go back to members. I believe it's 20,000, but I need to check in the financial regulations to confirm that.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? We'll move on to the recommendation, which is that the committee is asked to receive the capital monitoring position at Q1 as set out in the report. Have those in favour, please? Thank you. That's unanimous. We'll move on to item 7, which is the committee is asked to receive and note the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Review. It's over to Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we're bringing this report now, and this will be the usual time going forward, as we've heard earlier this evening. This will be the usual time to bring the local government ombudsman letter to Audit and Scrutiny Committee following its receipt in July, assuming that that's a process that continues for the foreseeable. We saw the year before that, we saw that letter at this meeting, Audit and Scrutiny meeting in April. And at that meeting, in the previous year's letter, the Ombudsman had raised a number of concerns about the way that Epsom and Ewell was dealing with some of the complaints that were referred to the Ombudsman. And I'm pleased to say, as you can see in the letter before you, that the Ombudsman in this year's letter has reflected on the improved performance and the improved relationship that we've got with them. And this follows on from a change in the way that we handled Ombudsman complaints, most importantly, separating them out from the customer service team who look after stage 1 and stage 2 complaints, and putting them into our business support team where they could be dealt with separately and with much more focus and much more robust control put in place. And we're seeing that that's actually led to an improvement in the service. I'd like to point out that if anyone ever wants to see how we're doing with the Ombudsman, the Ombudsman's information is always readily available. You can go to the Ombudsman site, you can click in Epsom and Ewell, and you can see how we're doing, and that applies for councillors, applies for members of the public. Anyone can go and see the details of how we're performing. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair. It does sound like a good idea to move it from the customer service to the business side of communications. But my question then is, when it was with the customer service side, and if the Ombudsman was repeatedly having problems communicating with the customer service, is there still an ongoing issue with the customer service? Because when I read the Ombudsman report, they seemed like they had persistently tried to contact the council and had been repeatedly failed, which makes me think it's more of a systemic issue rather than a one person. I may have the wrong end of the stick. I don't see everything, but just a bit more clarity on that from the customer service side. Thank you.
No, it's a fair observation, and I think we probably, if I'm being completely candid with you, the person who looks after complaints within customer services, there's a lot to look after. We've got a lot of stage 1 complaints because you get a lot of volume with that, missed bin collections and all those kind of things. You get a reasonable number. Well, I say there's a small percentage of those then get escalated to stage 2. So it's a very, very busy thing to deal with. And we're constantly wanting to get our responses back within the 15 days that we have to deal with the high volume. So I think the honest answer is that the very small number of complaints that we have going to the Ombudsman, they got lost within the volume of the higher number of stage 1 and stage 2 complaints. And sometimes when you're as in customer services, they're chasing for responses from other parts of the organization. And if you're not chasing and being on that, totally trying to chase colleagues to come back with timely answers, then sometimes it doesn't happen. And that's what I think we were finding. So now we've moved that out so that we've got people who can have an exclusive focus on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ames.
Thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions about this, particularly arising from what Mr. Birch has said and the answer given to Mr. Jagat-Pal earlier. But just to go back again on the point of why this 2021-22 Ombudsman's report was not brought before this committee, I'm a little bit unclear about this answer. I'm looking at the answer and I'm looking at the minutes of this committee from the 14th of June 2022. The first question would be, I'm really unclear about this idea that the Ombudsman's letter was on the work plan to be delivered in April of this year, but not on the work plan, which is part of this. But I'm actually looking at the committee minutes from 14th of June 2022. It's not in the work plan. It's not in the work plan for April 2023, which is when it was presented. And as Mr. Jagat-Pal read out, subsequent to that block, that table showing the work plan, it says, when the council receives its annual letter from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, we will note here whether any recommendations have been put to the council by the Ombudsman. It doesn't say when the council receives the letter, we will put it to this committee 9 months later. It says, when the council receives its annual letter from the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, we will note here whether any recommendations have been put to the council by the Ombudsman. The information that was given to Mr. Jagutpal earlier is factually incorrect. It was not on the work plan. It said that the letter will be presented to this committee when it's received. It said that in June. The letter was received by yourself, Chair, in July. I'm at a loss as to know it was an extremely serious number of issues of non-compliance, an ombudsman finding that what significant reputational damage to this council was reported in the national press. I don't really understand the function of this committee if it's not able to supervise the council's response to that. I have a couple more questions about the timing of the council's response, because that's unclear, but I wonder if you could just explain this claim that it was in the work plan to be delivered in April, when it literally says it's to be presented to this committee when it's received.
I think there's a lot there. I don't think I can answer all of that, because we have the written statement, the written response to the public question, and so that is there, and that's what we've provided, and I'm not going to go through that in detail. Well, I'm not going to go through that because we've provided that response. I think one thing to probably clarify is that whereas we have brought this as a separate standalone item to this meeting, and indeed we then took it as a separate standalone item to the 6th of April meeting, previously it has been within the work plan of the committee. The work plan of the committee, as you see later, covers many different aspects of activity that the committee is looking at, and it was a subset of that report, so it wasn't a standalone report. So might be missing the fact that when we talk about the fact it was coming, it was due to be as part of the work plan, which was due to be reported in April.
I think my question for you, Chair, is when you received this letter, you must have looked at this letter, you must have thought things are going very badly wrong. I must put this before the Audit and Scrutiny Committee at the next meeting rather than sit on it until April. I mean, surely as a competent chair, you would look at that letter. It was expressly said in the letter to have been addressed to yourself, Chair, and yet you sat on this report for something like 9 months. I don't really know or care whether this was custom or practice. It was an extremely critical report raising extremely critical issues, both about the complaint handling and about the substantive complaint. And yet, Chair, you sat on the report for 9 months. I really don't understand why you didn't think this needs to be brought before the committee as a matter of urgency so that the committee can supervise the officer's response to this. I have some more questions, Chair, about the timing of the responses that have been listed in the report. But surely, Chair, you should have just taken the initiative and put that report before this committee.
I can assure you that nothing has been hidden or anything else. Yes, I appreciate it should have been dealt with. However, the letter also goes to the Chief Executive and myself and other members. There are, as stated by Mr. Bircher, that the report is available for everybody to see. Nothing's hidden at all. And from what I hear, it's almost as if everybody's waiting for us to bring the report, but everybody can see it when it arrives. It's usually about the 20th of July.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to that point, you're absolutely correct that Councillor Gulland, former Councillor Gulland, brought this matter to the attention of this committee in February. In February, as far as I understand it, a new team had been given the responsibility for dealing with this issue. As far as I understand it, on the 1st of February, a service review mentioned in this report was commenced. The meeting of this committee took place on the 2nd of February. The issue was raised. At no point did either you or Mr. Bircher say to this committee, yes, we have this in hand and we've taken these actions. A service review was initiated, according to information given to Mr. Jagutpal, 1 day before the February meeting of this committee. Is that not pertinent information that should have been given when Councillor Gulland asked his question? You're absolutely right, Chair. This was brought to the attention of this committee by Councillor Gulland because it was in the public domain. At this point, should not the Chair and the officers have been straight and said, yes, we've seen this report, we've initiated a service review, we've changed the team, rather than just doing what this committee often seems to do, which is to say, we'll write to you and then brushing it under the carpet until a later day. I don't really understand, Chair, why you didn't say to this committee, we received this report, it's serious, we've initiated a service review yesterday. I'm not really sure why it took place 6 months after the report, probably because there was no supervision by this committee. We've changed the team dealing with this. I'm really not sure why this committee wasn't able to supervise that, and then why, when it was brought to the attention of the committee by a member, why you weren't straight with the committee and said, these matters are in hand now.
You've said actually the 1st of February, and then the meeting was on the 2nd. Obviously, reports and everything hasn't had time to go through. So I wasn't, I'd just been made aware that things had been instigated. However, you're talking about 1 day. So there's no time to put it in the reports because they were already being produced. And we haven't had time to discuss it because you say the 1st to the 2nd, you could be talking about 12 hours, which is not reasonable to actually go through everything. Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lawrence.
I just wanted to say, because you're saying the accusing you of like hiding the report. It's not that we think you hide it. As you said, it's a public domain report. Everyone can click on it and see it. It's more the fact it says in the June meeting in 22 that they would be published, and then there was a meeting that happened and it wasn't published. And then, of course, as pointed out, then it was later in the April one. So it's not that we think that you were necessarily trying to like hide a public report. It's just it just seems a little bit odd that a keynote report wouldn't be in there. And it's just looks a little bit odd to me as a councillor, because I wasn't a councillor at the time, just looking in on back of it, that a key report wouldn't be in there, and then it would pop up later. So it's different from like you not showing the report at all, but having a delay on action or putting it in a place that you wouldn't expect it, or when you're expecting it, it's not there. Feels a little bit like obscurism. That was all. Yeah, that was my only comment on what it looked like to me.
Thank you, Councillor Ames.
Sorry, Chair, one more couple of questions dressed up with an observation. Just specifically looking at the terms of the report that's before us today, it mentions 2 actions that followed the receipt of that report, and I'm a little bit unclear about the timelines. We've got one of them. Paragraph 3.3, Chair. Shortly after the publication of the 2021 annual review letter, the management of the Ombudsman's complaints was transferred to another team. Mr. Bircher has explained that to us. I wonder if somebody could tell me what shortly means, because it seems to be a little bit of a how long is a piece of string word, and I'd like some precision on that. And then I think we have had it confirmed by yourself, Chair, that the review of service did not commence until the 1st of February. I'm absolutely baffled as to why, when the chief executive, the former chief executive, met the Ombudsman in April 22, a review of service did not commence until February 2023. I mean, that's 10 months. Surely, if this committee had had supervision of this report, we would have said, or you yourself, Chair, would have said, what is going on here? Surely somebody should look at this urgently rather than leave it for 10 months.
If I haven't had a sorry, if I haven't had a reply or response from the head, from the CEO, then nothing can be done, because obviously that's got to be sorted out first. Then matters have got to be straightened up within the service department. So things just don't happen overnight, unfortunately. Yes, there was a time, it was a longer time. However, everything's been sorted out now. We're looking back on history. We need to look forwards now. Everything's been sorted out. Are there any further questions, please? No. Okay, we'll move on to the recommendations, which is to receive and note the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman Annual Report Letter of 22-23. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. We move on to item 8, which is the Performance Risk Report, September 23. As over to Mr. Bircher.
I might take that one, Chair. Thank you. Yes, this is the September Performance and Risk Report. Contained within Appendix 1, we have updates on our annual plan actions, key performance indicators, corporate risks. We do also have a section on our annual governance statement actions, but we haven't got updates in this edition of the report because the statement was actually approved by the committee in mid-July, and we request our data around that time as well. So just wasn't time to squeeze that into the report, but that will be included next time. And yes, happy to take any questions and also take away any questions if there's specific ones for particular services that aren't represented here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions at all, please? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. My question is going to be about what's on page 91. So I was looking at the risk identified around the failing to deliver the local plan, and it's max for both of those. And the risks it's talking about are things about budgets, staffing, legislative changes. So I just wanted to, since that's a very important thing for the borough and it's a max risk of failure, looks like to me here. Is there any specific parts of those, either budget, staffing, or legislative changes, that have caused you to put that as the highest possible chance of failure? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we probably need to update this actually, probably because since the time of producing this, we've had the LPPC meeting where there's been a decision to unpause or to recommend a recommencement of work on the local plan. I recognise that needs to be a council decision, but you know the issue here was at the point of looking at this, we had a local plan and we needed to produce a local plan and we were doing nothing on it essentially because we had paused it. So I think that is probably the worst situation that you can be in.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? Councillor Lawrence.
This was a question on SIL, if I can just find it. And it said, I've got my notes here. The question was, oh, here we go. So this is page 112. And it was saying about SIL that the place developments is going to review and update the SIL policies and brackets 31st of December 2023. Am I correct in interpreting that as a deadline that it will have been done by 31st December this year? Or is that more just a kind of we're aiming roughly for that date? Thank you.
Yeah, this was a date that we were aiming for, and again, it was trying to feed into the LPPC schedule and forward plan. It is still an ambition to take the new regulations, procedures to LPPC, but I don't think that's going to be happening in the next scheduled meeting. So that's probably going to slip into the new year. However, what I should say is we have recruited a SIL member of staff now, and so that's positive, and we are putting in place better ways of working to reflect how we should be compliant with SIL.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Neil.
As far as the local plan unpausing, have we identified any risk in, I believe a couple of the key personnel involved in the local plan are on a contract, a term contract. Are we at risk of losing them as we halfway through the next stage of the local plan submission? Have we identified if that is a risk?
Certainly, in terms of staffing, we do have a corporate risk in terms of availability of staff and the right people to do the right job at the right time. It is a nature of local plans that they're often fixed term, they're projects which have got an end, and so therefore you do tend to employ people on a fixed term basis. But now we know what we're doing. We'll be ensuring that the right funds are in place and the right people are in place to take that forward.
I was thinking more of have we talked to the personnel involved on these fixed term contracts? Are they willing to stay the course to the end of the local plan?
I can't talk about individuals, but I know that conversations have been taking place with the relevant people to make sure that we have the right resource in place to do the job that we need to do. So I think that I can't really say more than that, I don't think.
Councillor King.
Sorry, maybe this is something I should know, but obviously you've got the corporate risk register and then you've got individual risk registers for the different committees. How often are they updated and are they linked up? It's just that there seems to be, I can't find the one that I was trying to direct to, but they're not always, they don't all appear to be in line. Like for example, around housing, it doesn't say worsening in the community and wellbeing one, but it does in the corporate risk register. And I just wondered how that process works.
Thank you. So I think the first one was how often are they updated? So we have a set sort of minimum schedule of quarterly updating. So all the risks are contained on service business plans, which are accessible by the sort of managers and key individuals at any time. So they can be updated at any time, but we have a minimum requirement of quarterly. I might need to look into the specific example you referenced. I'm looking through the report, but essentially what happens is we have a few different levels of risk. So they start at sort of service operational risks that tend to not feature in this report. And then when they become more strategically important, that's when they get escalated up, and they'll typically get escalated to a committee level if that risk can be sort of controlled and managed by a specific committee. Once a risk sort of strays beyond the remit of one committee, it tends to then go onto the corporate register. So the corporate register sort of sits at the top of the pyramid. Then we have our committee risks, and then we have our service list risks and other sort of specific maybe project risks that sit underneath that. But I'm happy if just to take away that specific example, if you can sort of relay it to me afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? We'll move on to the recommendation. So the committee is asked to note and comment on the performance and risk information located at Appendix 1. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. So we'll move on to now item 9, which is the committee work programme. So this is the work programme for 23-24. Mr. Bircher.
I don't think there's much I need to say about this, Chair. It's your work programme. It's what we're proposing to bring to committee over the course of the next year.
Just to add that, Chair, if I can just draw members' attention to footnote 8 regarding the scheme of delegation. It's currently on it as this report went to press. It was due to come to the November meeting, but further to consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Standards and Constitution Committee, it's likely to miss that deadline and may at present it's looking like the February meeting it will come to this committee. So just wanted to give a verbal update to members.
Thanks very much. Yes, Councillor Ames.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for, as Mr. Ionta says, thank you for adding this item to the work plan, the item that Mr. Ionta's just referenced. Thank you, Mr. Ionta, again. I think you were extensively thanked during the council meeting in July for addressing this issue, bringing this issue on a very prompt basis to the committee. Amongst those comments, there were a number of comments of some dismay by councillors that we had got to that position where, without saying anything that isn't already in the public domain, it was said to be very important. Yes, Mr. Hunter, that would be addressed urgently. And there was some disquiet that it came to that. And I remember Councillor McCormick sitting over there saying that he would bring the circumstances under which this situation had arisen to this committee, in fact, to this meeting of the committee. Now, I'd just like to clarify what's the issue that is to come to this committee in November and possibly now February, because I think you're correct, Mr. Ionta, that it's an issue that should be looked at by the Standards and Constitution Committee, but it was promised by a senior councillor that he would request that the, I don't quite know the word, but the situation that had led to that meeting, that item going on the meeting agenda at short notice, that would all be looked into. And I don't believe that we have to wait for the council's opinion to look at that issue. And I wonder why we're not now looking at that issue. Perhaps, Mr. Ionta, you know better than me and you can explain it. Thank you.
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I have to say that differs from my recollection in terms of what was discussed. Obviously, we're in public session and we're discussing something that was in part 2, so forgive me having to choose my words carefully. My action point from that meeting was that it was clear that this committee should look at the overall situation and how the council found itself in the situation, more so than why it was a late report. But I'm happy to go back if we've still got the recording just to confirm if that's what was said.
Sorry, I must have misspoken there. I mean, essentially, it is how the council found itself into the situation. The fact that it was a very low notice report, I'm very well aware that you spotted the issue and you brought it to the full council very quickly. But the issue of explaining how that situation arose. If I could just clarify, perhaps with the chair, was there a request to address that issue at this meeting? Because, as I said, I don't think that issue needs to wait for the council's report, for which this council's paying. And when I say council, I mean QC. I don't know why we're not discussing how we came into that situation at this meeting. Chair, did you receive a request for that to be put on the agenda?
No, I haven't.
If I can add to that, Chair, further to my discussions with the Chair and Vice Chair of Standards and Constitution, we have limited resources, and therefore our priority has been dealing with the situation. And in light of that, we've delayed bringing it to this committee. I think the progress, hopefully members will agree, is to fix the problem and then to go into detail as to how we got there. So I know I'm due to speak to the chair and vice chair of this committee in due course to agree what the scope of the report to this committee will be. So I'm grateful for those comments. We'll make sure they're fed in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions at all, please? We'll move on to the recommendations. That the committee is asked to note and agree the ongoing work programme for 23-24 as presented in section 2. We all agree? Councillor Ames? Oh, sorry. Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All those against and any abstentions? Thank you. We'll move on to item 10. Now, within this, are there any questions directly relating to agenda item 10, appendix 2 at all, please? Because if there are, we have to move to part 2, if there are. Nope. Okay, we move on then. Thank you. So this is to recommend the internal audit report for 23-24 from SAAP attached at appendix 1. So it's over to Mr. Bircher. No, it's over to Natalie. Hi, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is your regular internal audit progress report. Probably the first one, just capturing 23-24 as a whole, because you'll hopefully recall the last meeting we were pulling together the annual report and opinion for 22-23. So there was a bit of a merger of progress there. In terms of I will take the report as read this evening, but just wanted to highlight a couple of key points. On page 129 of your pack, it provides you with a high-level delivery of and progress to date. So the number of reviews completed, number as work in progress, and the 55% yet to commence relates to Q3 and Q4 work, which with Q3 only a matter of days away, we'll be looking to get the scoping for those audits underway. On page 130, and also some further details in Annex 1 and Annex 2 of the report, this provides you with the summary of the status of the management actions and where they have past their original due date, the status of those and any revised due dates that we have on those. As at tonight, we're reporting that 25 management actions are overdue, 4 of which are high priority, but you'll see within Annex 1 and 2 that we have got revised dates for all of those that we're working on with officers. And just to give you that reassurance, as we have in previous meetings, internal audit follow all of those audit actions through to completion, so they will continue to be reported in this way until they're completed. In terms of delivery to date and the specifics, you'll see on page 131 and 132 the individual audits and the status of each of those. As I say, we have completed some work within the year already, with some reports right through to final. A number of audits are in progress and where we would expect them to be at this point in the year. And there haven't been any new adjustments to the plan since the last progress report that came to you in July. More than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Neal.
Thank you very much for the report. It's as usual, it's very, very clear. Well, apart from my clarification that I'm not going to ask on, you mentioned page 130. Could you just again, for my hopefully for all the councillors here, just clarification of the definition in the assurance opinion of limited. It seems to be an awful lot of limited ones there. Could you just explain exactly what that means?
Absolutely, Councillor Neal. In terms of, we have 4 categories of assurance opinion, and if I can just take members to page 128 of the paper, the 4 definitions are listed there. In terms of the limited assurance, what we are reporting is that we see there's significant gaps in either the control framework or non-compliance with the controls that are in place. When a report concludes with limited assurance, as you say, there are a few within page 130. You are receiving further details on those as and when those reports are finalised. So I appreciate that there isn't any within this paper this evening, but under section 5, so page 131, as I say, if we are reporting any limited or no assurance opinion reports, members do receive a summary of those observations and the actions that members are looking to put in place to address those. So you do receive that bit of extra detail on those as and when they arise.
Thank you very much for that. I should have picked that up on the other page. I must have skipped. Does that give you any concern about the amount of limited where, as the definition says, significant gaps and weaknesses or non-compliances were identified? Should we have a concern for the amount that we have in that category?
Thank you, Councillor Neil. In terms of the table itself on page 130, I think it's important to look at the report dates on some of those. So although it may appear that there are a number of limiteds within that, they do span over the last 2.5 financial years. And that table is only including reports where actions still remain overdue. So in terms of that wider summary, and the point that I would always be considering as your Chief Internal Auditor is the overall annual report and opinion that I am providing you with in terms of the framework of governance, risk management and control. So for 22-23 financial year, and previous financial years that SIAP have been your internal audit provider, we've been concluding overall, based on the scope and the reviews that we've done within that year, we've concluded reasonable assurance as a whole. And I think one of the other things to note is we're always very keen to work work positively with officers and with yourself as members and ensure that the audit plans that we are delivering are truly risk-based audit plans. And what that often lends itself to is that officers may say, actually, it's really important we get some assurance on this because perhaps it's a new area or it's an area where there's been, resource troubles or something as an example. And therefore, although our conclusion may come out as limited overall on some of those reviews, we're working positively with officers. It's not necessarily a surprise to officers and it's reinforcing to them what actions need to be put in place. So it's also about having that two-way process in terms of pulling the plan together in the first place. But in summary, to your question, Councillor Neil, for me it's more that wider assurance of that annual report throughout the year, which I'm comfortable and pleased to report has been reasonable assurance over the last few years. And it's the actions being taken on those individual reports that are important to see that improvement on the framework of control.
Any further questions, please? Okay, we'll move on to the recommendations. Of the external audit report, the committee is asked to receive and the indicative external audit plan for 22-23. Sorry, got the wrong page. Well, the committee asked note the internal audit progress report for 23-24 from SIAP attached at Appendix 1. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Chair.
That completes the meeting for this evening.